I knew something was off the second Cameron introduced that intern like he was handing me a sandwich. Slapped together, still warm with entitlement and impossible to return. "This is Cole," he said, like I should have been honored. The guy was all soft voice and over-ironed khakis, like his mom still laid out his clothes and tucked in his ego. Cameron, on the other hand, practically reeked of self-importance. Same blue power tie he wore to every quarterly review, probably slept in it. "Let him shadow you," he said, tossing it out like gum on the sidewalk. "He's here to learn." Learn what, exactly? How to patch other people's bad data pipelines with duct tape and 3 cups of cold brew? Because that's what my job had become. I'd been with Calix nearly 9 years, built the ops dashboard, wrote the vendor logic from scratch, held this place together with pivot tables and prayer, and now I was a glorified Excel janitor with a fresh intern breathing on my shoulder. Still, something in Cole's tone made me pause. He didn't try to impress me. Didn't name drop professors or rattle off resume filler. He just asked if he could dig through the vendor folder while I worked. Most interns ask how to get to the cafeteria, so I let him. And by the end of the day, he'd flagged 3 invoice patterns I'd never noticed. 2 of them possibly duplicates. One that hinted someone was either lazy or sloppy with procurement. He pointed and said, "Is it weird these all got signed on the same day but by 3 different people?" His eyes were dead calm, no showboating. I leaned over, checked the audit logs, and something clicked in the back of my skull. Quiet, but sharp. Like a door creaking open where I hadn't known there was a door. If you've made it this far, take 2 seconds to hit that subscribe button and like the video. It seriously helps us keep bringing you these wild, true stories. 97% of people listen without subscribing, but even one tap makes a big difference for the team behind this. Thanks. Back to Cole. That night I stayed late, not because I had to, but because something in those logs didn't sit right. He stayed too. We didn't talk much, just moved between spreadsheets like 2 surgeons operating on the same patient. At around 9:40 p.m., he turned his laptop and whispered, "Is it normal for the same IP address to show up on 3 approval logs?" My stomach dropped. That was either a glitch or a very bad sign. We ordered takeout, ate it at our desks, didn't leave until after midnight, came back Saturday and Sunday. By the time the sun rose Monday morning, we'd built a clean, brutal report. 16 pages of raw process failings, false efficiency metrics, and corrective actions that could, conservatively, raise EBITDA by 22% in 18 months, if anyone had the guts to implement them. When we finished, Cole leaned back, cracked his knuckles, and asked, "Do you think they'll even read this?" I stared at the polished deck. Simple title. Tidy numbers. Brutal truth. I said, "Depends on who puts their name on it." Cameron didn't show up once that weekend. Not even a single email check-in. Which, fine. If you're delegating, delegate. But don't waltz in Monday like you wrestled the data yourself and expect a parade. Meanwhile, Cole and I were running on adrenaline and discount sushi, comparing invoice chains like we were decoding zodiac letters. I hadn't felt that kind of electric tension in years, where work actually mattered, where the numbers weren't just reports, but fingerprints. Friday night blurred into Saturday. We were sitting on the floor at one point, cross-referencing supplier timelines on a giant whiteboard because Excel just couldn't handle what we were chasing. At one point, I looked over and Cole had drawn a connection between 2 departments that hadn't shared a vendor in 4 years, but now magically did, with inflated costs and a new intermediary I'd never heard of. He just circled the entity name and said, "This one smells like someone's cousin." By Sunday evening, my neck felt like it had fused to my spine, and Cole was blinking like a war orphan. But the report was done. 16 slides. Crisp. Not bloated with marketing nonsense or charts designed to distract. Just pure operational surgery. We had red-flagged inefficiencies, laid out a fixed timeline, included impact projections. We even color-coded by implementation difficulty and return potential. It was one of the most honest things I'd ever submitted under my name. At least, that was the plan. 7:42 a.m., Monday, I emailed it to Cameron directly. I even labeled the file like a dork. Final report operational disparities v2 hues mead.pdf. No ambiguity. No room for someone to miss who wrote it. I watched the timestamp hit my outbox and allowed myself 1 sip of coffee. 24 minutes later, Cameron replied, Nice start. I'll handle from here. I opened his version. I stared. No names. Font changed to that weird startup-y Helvetica nightmare he uses. The title? Innovating Process Futures. He'd slapped 5 new slides on the end, slides that might as well have been generated by an AI trained exclusively on TED Talks and expired PowerPoints. He removed the appendix, the links, the color-coded timelines, the context. He gutted it. I didn't move for 10 minutes, just sat there while my coffee went cold and my blood turned to lava. Cole came in holding 2 paper cups. He took it, didn't he? I nodded. Should we say something? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to. Every cell in my body was screaming for confrontation, for justice, for even just one person in that office to stand up and say, hey, maybe don't steal the work of the people who actually give a damn. But I also knew the rules. I'd watched people get iced out for less. I'm okay waiting, Cole added softly. I looked at him. So was I. That day dragged like wet cement. Every meeting felt like a rerun. Cameron strutted through the halls like he'd personally cracked the Enigma code, not just hijacked the deliverable 2 underpaid people stitched together over 3 unpaid nights. He gave a preview in the 11 a.m. ops sync, tossing around terms like pipeline exfoliation and scalable stewardship, like he'd just invented the English language and was testing it on us for the first time. No mention of vendor leaks, no audit trail, just fluff. When someone asked about the implementation tiring, he brushed it off with, oh, it's in the appendices, high-level stuff, not investor-facing. There were no appendices. Cole sat in the corner, scribbling in a legal pad he never let anyone see. I caught his eye once. He didn't blink, just kept writing. By 3 p.m., Cameron started printing handouts, our report, with his edits. I caught a glimpse of his cover page on the copier tray, presented by Cameron Briggs, Director of Operational Strategy. That was the first time I felt it not in my gut, but in my chest. That dull, heavy weight of something being taken that wasn't just work. It was the kind of theft that doesn't show up in logs, the kind that eats at your dignity like termites in the walls. I walked to HR, got halfway there, turned around. He'd covered himself. Nothing illegal. Just enough plausible deniability and buzzword padding to pass for leadership. And me? I was just another name on a cubicle placard with no direct reports and too much email history to start over somewhere else. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed rerunning every moment I'd given this place. Every system I'd built that someone else now used like their personal jungle gym. Every promotion I didn't get because titles are frozen right now. Every great work email that led to nothing. And now this, having the one piece of work I was actually proud of cannibalized and shrink-wrapped into corporate oatmeal. Tuesday morning, I almost didn't go in. I sat in my car for 7 minutes with the AC on, debating whether to turn around and go find a new life bartending somewhere that didn't have a Slack channel. But I walked in anyway. Because if I'd learned anything from nearly a decade in ops, it was this. You don't fix broken systems from the parking lot. Cameron passed me in the hallway and clapped me on the back like we were war buddies. Great assist, Hughes. Couldn't have built this without your scaffolding. Scaffolding. Like I was a metal pole holding up his stage. Cole didn't say anything. Just stood behind him in a navy button-down with a faint lanyard tucked into his shirt. I didn't catch the text on it until he walked away. But when I did, my spine went cold. Ridgeline Capital. He wasn't just an intern. By Thursday, he was insufferable. Cameron floated from desk to desk like he was running for office, shaking hands, dropping phrases like disruptive insights and visionary execution, as if he'd dreamed them up in a fever and not lifted them straight off our slides. He started calling the report my white paper, as though the term gave it more legitimacy, more him. I heard him say to someone in the break room, I mean, yeah, I took their raw data, but what matters is how you shape it. You know, elevate the narrative. Cole and I looked at each other from across the hallway. His face didn't change. But mine probably did. Because if I'd had any hope left that maybe Cameron would give some shred of shared credit before showtime, it died right then, next to the stale bagels and reheated ambition. Then came the dry runs. The first one was with the VP of Ops and 3 directors. Cameron stood like a TED Talk reject, waving his arms at our graphs like he'd raised them by hand. He cracked jokes about slaying sacred cows and clearing vines from the runway, which I'm fairly certain he got from some lean startup book he skimmed in the airport once. They laughed. They nodded. Someone even said, "This is exactly the energy we need for Series C." Cole and I sat in the back like interns at our own funeral. After the second run-through, Cameron walked past me, fist bumped me like I was his hype man, and said again, "Great support, man. Couldn't have done it without your scaffolding." Then he winked, like we had a private joke. All I wanted to do was stand up and scream, not even yell, just lay it out in plain terms. Here's the report. Here's the timestamp. Here are the tracked changes. Here's the work. But you know what doesn't exist in corporate America? Receipts that matter. The louder person wins. And Cameron? He had volume on his side. Later that day, he swung by my desk, leaned in, still grinning. "Investor session's gonna be tight. I got this. Just stay humble, play the long game." He gave me that condescending smirk people use right before they eat your lunch in front of you and thank you for the recipe. He didn't even notice Cole, who was sitting just behind me in the corner, quietly reviewing notes. That's when I saw it. Barely visible, tucked into his shirt, was the lanyard. Ridgeline Capital. White letters, blue badge. It took a second to click. Ridgeline Capital wasn't just a random VC. They were one of the 2 anchor investors on Friday's pitch list. And the man who ran Ridgeline? Jonathan Meade. Silver hair, MBA legend, zero tolerance for fluff. That's when the knot in my stomach started to loosen. Just a little. Because maybe, just maybe, Cole wasn't here to learn how this place worked. Maybe he was here to see who was pretending to know what they were doing. Cole didn't even flinch. I remember thinking, he's too calm for an intern. While Cameron stood there with his laser pointer raised like a fencing foil, Cole just sat back in his chair, hands folded neatly, like he'd been waiting for that exact question. The kind of posture that said, "Finally." No scramble, no panic, no awkward glances at me. Just a steady breath in through the nose and the softest nod I'd ever seen. "No, sir," Cole said evenly. "We held back a few elements. Pending validation. I have them here." His voice didn't rise. It didn't try to fill the room, but it took the room. He reached into his bag and pulled out a plain black USB. No branding, no label. Just a simple drive. He placed it on the table in front of Meade like a closing argument. Cameron coughed again. Not the performative one this time. This one was real, dry, hollow. I wasn't aware we had a second draft," he stammered, looking from Meade to me, then to Cole, trying to triangulate who was going to throw him a rope. No one moved. The silence grew arms and legs and wrapped itself around his throat. Meade looked at the assistant beside him. A nod. The USB was inserted into the main display. The slides changed. My heart stuttered. There it was. Our real deck. Same structure, same progression. But this version didn't speak in tongues. No marketing fluff. No synergistic optimization or vertical reimagination. Just raw, grounded analysis. The procurement anomalies. The IP duplication flags. The vendor inflation pattern Cole had found buried 5 years deep. Clean formatting. Footnotes on every page. Hyperlinked source data. Color-coded tiers. Even our appendix was back. 11 pages of references Cameron had dumped like ballast. Meade scrolled silently through the slides. No gasps, no overreactions, just that same surgical quiet. When he reached slide 12, the implementation matrix, he stopped. "This is what I came to see," he said simply. Then he turned to Cameron and asked, "How exactly did you think we wouldn't find this?" Cameron was pale. I didn't know that was finalized," he said. "We were still editing. I was going to present an updated version next week." Cole said nothing, just looked at him. Meade narrowed his eyes. "You didn't recognize my son?" The room cracked, not with noise, but with change, like the sound of air pressure shifting before a storm. Cameron blinked, twice, then turned to Cole with the kind of expression you see on a man watching a fuse burn toward a stick of dynamite. Meade sat back and folded his hands. "This deck, the one your team actually built, is what we'll be reviewing today. You can excuse yourself." It was said like a suggestion, but it wasn't. The silence after that hit like a body drop in a wrestling ring. No one moved. No one spoke. I think even the HVAC took a break. Cameron's face had gone from pale to colorless, like the life had been siphoned out with a turkey baster. He looked around the room like someone might step in, offer him an out, a smirk, a wink, a "you got us." But this wasn't one of his run-throughs, and no one here had time for his one-man improv show. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. This is obviously a misunderstanding. I was synthesizing input from across the team, and you deleted their names, Meade said flatly. You called it yours. Cameron swallowed hard. I was presenting the vision, not the raw inputs. Meade stood. I'd never seen someone command that much attention without raising their voice. I don't reward people who bury contributions to inflate their own. You're excused. Please collect your things. Cameron's jaw moved like he was chewing on glass. He looked at me, then at Cole, like he still hadn't fully grasped the math of what was happening. His eyes were pleading, frantic, like we were in on something and just taking the joke too far. But there was no joke. There was just the truth. And now it was on the damn projector. Security didn't make a scene, just appeared. Quiet, calm, professional. Cameron backed away slowly, his movements robotic, like his brain had left the building before his body. I saw the moment he realized it was really happening, when he saw Meade wasn't bluffing, when no one in the room looked at him like a leader anymore. He walked out carrying a cardboard box that I was 99% sure still had my report's appendix pages inside it. Meade turned to the room. I assume there's someone here who actually ran this analysis? Everyone turned to look at me. I stood, heart slamming in my chest, legs stiff like I hadn't moved in a year. I'm Darren, I said, trying not to choke on my own name. Darren Hughes. Meade nodded once. Well, Darren, stay. We're doing the real review now. Cole, still seated beside me, casually opened the deck on his laptop. He leaned in and whispered, Page 12, Mr. Meade. Meade smiled faintly and replied, Let's go there. The air shifted the second Cameron was gone. It wasn't just that the room was quieter, it was cleaner, like someone had opened a window that had been sealed shut for years. The investors sat straighter. Laptops came out. Pens clicked. Suddenly, everyone was listening, not to be impressed, but to understand. And that's what Cole and I gave them. Slide by slide, we walked through the layers. No performance, no fireworks, just brutal, well-supported truths. The kind of truths you can only find if you care enough to dig in after hours and don't mind getting your hands dirty with the vendor logs no one else wants to touch. Cole let me lead, which somehow meant more than if he'd taken over. He didn't hover, didn't correct me. He knew I knew the material because we'd built it together, side by side in the dark corners of this company where the real work happens. We got to page 12, the implementation roadmap, and Meade leaned forward, nodding slowly. This, he said, tapping the table, is how you protect investor capital. One of the junior partners from a separate firm leaned toward Meade and whispered something. Meade nodded again, eyes still on the screen. Then he turned to Cole and said, When did you first flag the invoice overlap? Second day, Cole replied. Slide 7 has the chain, but the cross-reference is in the appendix, tab B. Meade actually chuckled. I like you. Someone from HR finally spoke. Will there be a formal report, or... Meade didn't even look at her. This is the report. I caught that. How quickly the authority transferred. How fast the room flipped once truth got traction. I'd spent years trying to prove myself with airtight analysis, cover-your-ass summaries, and bulletproof logic. But I learned in that moment that it only takes one person in power who actually gives a damn about substance over sparkle to turn everything. When the review ended, they asked for the deck. Not the one Cameron butchered, the one with our names restored in the metadata, with the audit logs embedded, with the implementation details linked out in living documentation. Cole emailed it to them from his Ridgeline account. As people filed out, Meade pulled me aside. You've got two choices, he said. Keep propping up people like Cameron, or actually lead. He didn't need to say the rest. I understood. Back at my desk, everything felt different. HR tried to schedule a transition sync. Cameron's old whiteboard still had buzzwords scrawled in dry erase marker. Scale, reframe, own. I erased them all with one swipe. Then I wrote 2 words in the middle. Let's begin. That room felt like a mausoleum for bad decisions. His notes were still on the whiteboard, half-baked metaphors and bullet points that didn't mean anything unless you were trying to confuse someone on purpose. Leverage the chaos. Turn friction into fuel. There was a stack of old decks on the shelf labeled Vision Talks. I didn't open them. I just slid the whole pile into the trash and took a long sip of my lukewarm tea. The view out the window wasn't impressive, just the parking lot and a row of hedges that needed trimming. But it was mine now. Not borrowed, not begged for, not awarded after a one-on-one golf trip. Earned. Quietly. Exactly the way I liked it. I pulled up the master file, found slide 12, and stared at the roadmap Cole and I had built. Not just bullet points, actual milestones, layered with realistic estimates and downstream risks, the kind of slide you didn't need to explain because it respected the reader's intelligence. It had never needed Cameron's voice layered over it. It just needed space. At 9:03 a.m., my inbox pinged. Subject, thank you, from Cole. No body text, just a link to a shared folder. Revised optimization layer, 6MEO plan. He was already ahead. Of course he was. I replied, let's build. No punctuation, no sign-off, just that. By lunch, the office was different. Not in a way you could pin down, but in the way people started asking better questions. People who used to just nod through Cameron's bluster now came to my desk with actual numbers. Hey, do you think this vendor redundancy is part of what Cole found? Could that report structure apply to our Q1 ops deck? What would it take to roll this out beyond procurement? They weren't scared anymore of ideas, of being ignored, of speaking up. Even HR, God bless their delayed reflexes, asked if I wanted to update my title card. You know, she said, fidgeting, now that you're interim, we could do something bold. Strategic commander? I laughed for the first time in weeks. Just put Darren Hughes, keep it simple. And that afternoon, as I walked through the bullpen, I saw Cole talking to the head of finance. Calm, collected, sleeves rolled, same damn sweater. The badge on his belt said, Strategic Liaison, but I knew better. He wasn't here to learn, he was here to see. And now that he'd seen, we weren't playing the same game anymore. The meeting wrapped without applause, without grandstanding. Just a few exchanged glances, quiet nods, and people gathering their things like they'd just sat through a weather forecast that actually told the truth for once. No fireworks, no big finale, but something had shifted in that room, and we all knew it. Not because anyone said it, but because no one had to anymore. Cole packed up his laptop like a surgeon closing up after a clean operation. No blood, no complications. Just precision. The deck, our real deck, had lived its life, served its purpose. Now it was archived, version locked, and properly credited. A timestamp beside both our names. That mattered more than any award ever could. Meade lingered a moment longer than everyone else, his coffee long gone, just the empty cup in his hand. He looked out the window, then back at me. You know, he said, most companies don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they mistake noise for leadership. I didn't respond. He wasn't asking for a reply. He tapped the edge of the table once, then left without another word. Cole was already gone. Left through the side door, no fanfare, no backpats. Just moved on to wherever Ridgeline needed him next. But I'd catch his name now and then, floating through emails, CC'd on review chains, ghosting through conversations like an orbiting satellite. Watching, making sure people didn't forget what real work looked like. I stayed in that room a little longer. Let the silence settle. Let the weight of everything that had happened pass through me, not just the stolen credit or the humiliating weeks of watching a fraud take my oxygen, but the years before that. The quiet ones. The ones where I convinced myself that being behind the curtain meant safety, that if I just worked hard enough, kept my head down, didn't ruffle anything, I'd be okay. I was wrong. Being invisible doesn't protect you. It just makes it easier for someone else to steal the light and call it theirs. That deck, my deck, was still up on the projector, paused on the final page. Below the recommendations, in small, neat type, the author credits sat there. Clear, indisputable. Cole Meade, Darren Hughes. No asterisks, no on behalf of. Just us. I shut the laptop. And as the screen went dark, I saw my own reflection for the first time. Not dimmed, not in someone else's shadow, not faded around the edges. just there. I used to think being invisible was safer. Turns out, all it takes is one person looking in the right direction.